Thank you for auditing Professor Skye's Record Review, the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who took the recommendation of a couple of my auditors, and I'm going to be reviewing the EP Alias by Shygirl. And I sort of have a question for you, This is a very quick EP, it's good, it's like 19 minutes, 7 songs, and I didn't know that much about Shygirl, I'd never heard of her, and so I did a little bit of research, and I stumbled across an article. It was actually a review from Pitchfork, and on this review, which was a solid review, very well written, I think it was generally positive too, they had this tagline: "It's a glittering portal into the future." Now, I don't disagree with that, because when I heard this, I also thought, ooh, this sounds very futuristic. But I'm starting to ask the question, are we in the future? Like, futuristic sounds, in general, get really dated really quickly. That's what's kind of funny, because, for, 60 years now, we've had this sort of idea of what the future is going to sound like and what the future is going to look like. And when you think about that, the way that the future is represented in the past is very indicative of the past. You see Back to the Future Part 2, and it has nothing to do with 2015, everything to do with 1985, right? Or 87, whenever it came out. So in general, things that are futuristic are the easiest to date because they have some kind of view of how things are going to change. So I understand why the reviewer called this music futuristic. But I actually don't think it is. I think it's nowistic. I think this is very much the sound of now. I think the things that make it sound futuristic to us is because our brains are a little bit stuck. I mean, a lot of things that make this sound futuristic were done over 20 years ago by the Neptunes and by Timbaland, like their sort of soundscape of very heavy, somewhat dissonant synthesizers and kind of twisted beats and having everything feel just a little bit off, a little bit unheimlich, a little bit uncanny. Like, these things have been done for 20 years. And I would really say that we are this is not at all futuristic. This is nowistic. I'm coming up with that word. I'm going to make it happen. I just came up with it right now. We'll see if I still like it by the end of the video. And this album is very much like that. It is extremely of the moment. It sounds like many things that I've heard. It sounds like a lot of things that I found quite interesting. It's mostly produced by someone named Sega Bodega, who I just discovered because he produced a lot of tracks on the Dorian Electra album, an album which I liked quite a bit. I reviewed it up there. Again, these futuristic sounds of like these keyboards, and maybe one of the biggest components of whatever is nowistic is this mixture of genres, just this sludge. This is sort of a rap album. It's sort of a experimental electronic dance music album. It's sort of just a straight electronic dance album. It's just all these things at once. And I think that sort of pluralistic nature is very much of the time. And in particular, what this album does better than most others is that it's very, it's a sex-laden album. Sex, everywhere. Everything is sex in this album, in this EP. But it never feels raunchy, which is weird. And the production is often kind of grimy. It's a very British sounding album, right? That kind of British grime. But her voice is so smooth, and the instruments aren't overly distorted or super bassy or glitchy. So even though it sounds like it belongs with, Arca and Dorian Electra and this sort of hyper-aggressive, glitchy pop / EDM / industrial fork in the garbage compactor, it sort of has all those things mixed up. It has a very pleasant mixture of smooth and grimy. And that really is very much what I think brings this project most of its interest for me. She is an interesting person, because she is a rapper, but her rhymes aren't particularly good. She doesn't have a particularly good flow. They're not bad. But then she also kind of sings, and she doesn't have a particularly good voice. And she also talks she's sort of more of a personality than she is like a musician. But what she brings to this whole album is great, and it's a lot of personality, and it's a great combination of all these individual elements. But it sort of had me wondering, what exactly is she doing? A lot of what makes this a very nowistic album. I'm pushing through with it, by the way. Please put in the comments if you'd like the term nowistic. Do you understand what I mean by it? I mean, it is the now that sounds futuristic. Do you get that? That's what I mean by nowistic. I'm going to make it work. A lot of it is about the themes. So a lot of these albums that I've been studying and listening in this, I just kind of stumbled into this, right? Like, I'm just some dude in his 40s living in Western New York, and I've just been trying to listen to a lot of new music, and so much of what seems so interesting and vital is in this gender bending, sex bending, like psychotically poppy, electronic, aggressive music, and a lot of it is these themes. And in this album, it's interesting because it's sort of about female empowerment. It's about a woman in England, right? And talks about using her sexuality, but at times it's very unclear who is speaking or what she's talking about. It's unclear if she's writing from the perspective of herself or if she's writing from the perspective of somebody who is using her. But all the way throughout, it seems as though she's proud to be used, happy to be used, but also kind of aware that the fact that she's happy to be used might be because there's something wrong with her. That will, I think if you read between the lines, that originates with poor parenting and will end in loneliness. Jesus. Okay. I'm sorry. That sounds a lot more sad. You know what, though? I think that's on purpose. I think this is a very good piece of art because I do think that's what's implied in these texts. That you sort of start off with a bad upbringing, you then sort of like try to mediate your feeling of emptiness and sadness through sex and through approval of men and women and just about everything, it seems. And then that ultimately ends with the same emptiness that you were trying to avoid that started over here. I'm not quite sure. It's funny because I do think this fits quite well with another album I reviewed recently, Megan Thee Stallion, her album. I think in a similar way, you know, that the idea of female sexuality being out and forward and having to deal with it and having to live with it. Unlike Megan Thee Stallion, I don't feel challenged. I don't feel like Shygirl is particularly trying to challenge me as a man. I don't feel like I'm not good enough, right? Which is a lot of the feeling that I think Megan Thee Stallion was able to bring out. But it is at least, but it's maybe more acceptable. It's easier to listen to because there is no sex for money exchange, which is often either implied or directly stated in Megan Thee Stallion. But still, if we were to take a sort of broad look, right? If I was putting together a class on, women in hip hop in 2020, I would put these two albums together and force my students to see the similarity of different interpretations of strong female sexuality, which is great that there isn't just one form, right? There's multiple forms. And this form is confusing as hell. I don't know what's going on. I can't figure it out. But I'm just going to lean into that. I'm just going to lean into that as being a dude with a couple kids and who lives in the suburbs. You know, like I don't quite get everything she's saying. I don't understand her sexuality at all. And I'm not sure I'm supposed to. I think it's just supposed to feel like sex without me really understanding what it means. One thing I like about this, and maybe this is where the sort of slimy and clean thing comes through at the same time, is her name is Shygirl, but then the whole album is all like, you know, let's F and let's do this and my hands are wet and all this kind of stuff, right? It seems to be very out there and very, very just bravado, bravado, bravado. But I don't think it's an oxymoron that she calls herself Shygirl. You know, like an oxymoron, like you see some guy who's, you know, really big and you call him tiny, right? Just, you know, kind of a typical oxymoron. I don't think it's that. I don't think this is supposed to be a joke. I think that she is shy. And I feel that behind her voice. And I think maybe that's the strength of her, you know, bravado, is that it comes from someone who's actually kind of shy, who's like trying to like, there's a longing in this sort of like this posture that she takes of being this super positive, sexual, domineering sex goddess. That I think the Shygirl is real. And I think the fact that she named the album Alias is on purpose, right? I don't think it's a reference to the Jennifer Garner TV show. I think it's a reference to her sort of being different people all at once. But I get the sense that at the heart of it, she actually is a shy girl. But I don't know. I don't know anything about her. That's what's kind of fun, you know, when I get these recommendations, sometimes I just find, you know, I look things up and there's just very little. I do wonder about the cover. So this is the cover, pretty emblematic of the kind of thing that this album is like, okay? Just kind of unsettling. It's like flesh and it's face, and And my first take was, oh, it looks like Angry Orange. I don't think it's that. I think is it supposed to be like that Doctor Who episode? You know, the one where people have so much plastic surgery they just turn into a sheet of skin? I don't know if it's supposed to be that. That's sort of interesting outside part of this album. Another interesting thing is every track is just one word. And it seems that's pretty on purpose. Just that this is supposed to be a direct, blunt album of absolute nowistness? No, what did I call it? Futuristic? Nowistic? Is that what I called it? I don't even remember. Okay, it's not taking off. Okay, let's go track by track here. I'm going to start off. I'm actually going to play you a little bit of the first track so you can hear some of Sega Bodega's great production. I mean, Sega Bodega seems to be in this whole Sophie Arca school of production where things are very experimental and poppy and glitchy all at the same time. But I don't know. He's really good. He's a really good producer. You'll hear kind of a twisting beat. It reminded me a little bit of Get Your Freak On, the song by Missy Elliott and Timbaland. And I do think that much like with Megan Thee Stallion, Missy Elliott's work is largely responsible for all of this stuff that's happening now, okay? I think that especially her attitude towards herself and her sexuality mixed in with Timbaland's futuristic beats, now have become kind of nowistic, that's the word. You know, like this is how, I really hear that influence everywhere, you know. Again, I think when we look back at the 20th century, late 20th century, and we sort of say, oh, what were the most influential albums? I think Super Duper Fly might end up being top 5 as far as most influential albums of that decade. But anyways, let's listen to a little bit of the song 12. I'm just picking somewhere randomly in here so you can hear her voice, the kind of sultry, shy bravado that she has with these very interesting kind of twisting beats. Very unsettling. The whole album is quite unsettling, like the cover. Okay, I think you can hear it. You hear that very strong British rapping, the kind of like kind of a lecherous sound to it, and she raps about being creepy and about using and being used all the way throughout. At the very end, there's like this little keyboard note that indicates there's going to go something else is going to happen. It's going to be super crazy and nutsy, but then it just isn't. God, this is why I probably should have a script. I shouldn't use terms like nutsy. What does that even mean? I've never said those words in my life, and I decided to double up on them. How nowistic of me. Slime is a track which will probably get a lot more attention than the rest because it's produced by Sega Bodega and co-produced by Sophie. I don't think it's better because it's co-produced by Sophie, even though Sophie's a bigger name. Very kind of simplistic melody, just a couple notes with cool like voice in the background. It's a sex song, but I don't know what it means. She tore it. Look at that slime. That silk smooth dirty wine. I don't know. I don't know if these words are just like free association or if there's some kind of thing, and I don't know. Like there's dirty wine is a very famous sex move. I don't know how you never heard of it. I don't know. This whole thing seems to be just like if a man rapped, this sounds like they're just straight words from a man talking about going to a club and picking up women. And so the whole thing, like it's just delivered like that all the way through. And so I don't know. I don't know what her point is. Is her point that this is what she does and she's bisexual or lesbian? I guess I actually don't know. I don't know. And that's what she's saying. That doesn't seem quite right. It seems to be almost a satire. Like the lyrics are a satirical take of the way that men rap about and think about going to a club and picking up bitches, right? So that's interesting, but I can't tell. I just can't tell. It's a very ambiguous album, which is to its credit. Next track is called Freak, which has kind of a sleepier delivery. She has sort of a couple different modes, and this is one of them. A little bit more of an industrial beat here. Just going on over and over again, do me on the floor, do me on the floor. Has sort of like a typical EDM thing where it speeds up from quarter notes to like 64th notes, you know, which I just don't hear that very often. I listen to a lot of electronic music, and I used to love that. It's so much fun when they go quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes. 'Cause I get down low and I'm always with a guy. Yeah, I can bring a girl or I can bring a whole crew. Meet me at the bar. If you lose me, I can find you. I don't know. I don't, is this like an orgy song? Is this like a spiritual orgy song? I'm not quite sure. And then this whole last line, if you lose me, I can find you. She sounds desperate. She sounds needy, right? Like if someone says, hey, meet me over there. If you lose me, I can find you. There is all the way, all the time throughout this album, even though it's all like, I do sex, behind it, there's this real insecurity. I'll find you at the bar. It has some orgasmic sounds at the end. Again, this does pair really well with Megan Thee Stallion. Truthfully, it's better than the Megan Thee Stallion album, just in terms of its quality of production all the way throughout. Not as good rhymes, but it's probably a better listen. Why am I comparing them? I don't do that on this show. I take that back. The next track is called Tasty, which is just, it's a nice break, because this isn't really experimental. It's just a house track, like the keyboard and drums, do, 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 do. Just all about being spun around and satisfied, and just the typical sort of, gee, I like good sex kind of songs. Not too experimental, which is a nice breakup before the next song, Leng, L-E-N-G. I had to look this up. Apparently that's British slang for someone who's very attractive. It kind of slows down and speeds up in the beat. Very abstract and sexualized. This is not with Sega. It's with someone named Happa. And has kind of like a feeling, like that kind of like vertiginous, fast arpeggiated keyboards that, again, is a nice production, a little bit different than the rest. And I'm just going to read these lyrics again. And I just try to help me figure out what is the perspective here as the sun comes in and burns me like a vampire. That girl, real wet, when he comin' on me. Everybody says sket, but you still wanna pre. I see my size, I see freeze. Too loud in the back, everybody like me. Screw face in the place. If you're bad, let's see. Nobody coming through badder than me. It's just it's a soup. You know what it is? It's a soup. A lot of this stuff is a soup. It's just like a soup of like dirty words and dirty thoughts and just kind of all mixed in. And maybe that's part of what makes it so much of the moment, is this difficulty in discerning what exactly is being said and who exactly is saying it. You know, that's maybe the great freedom of this whole whatever experimental hyper pop, all this stuff is it's really hard to define. Like, I get it, right? Like that's the sort of feeling you get. Like you get it. I can't describe it, but I get it, right? And after these lyrics, there's a great breakdown and some good bassy stuff happening, kind of like a random trap beat that I wrote this down, but I'm pretty happy with it. They have like a weird trap beat that seems to be falling apart as it gets played. And the metaphor I get is like a poorly constructed taco. You know, it's just like this trap beat, you hear the and these like lowered voices, but it just kind of keeps falling apart. The next track, the penultimate track, is called Body, a fun homonym, B-A-W-D-Y. Almost like a Middle Eastern melody, Sega Bodega's back. These cool kind of like crackling horns at the basis of this song that sound like someone playing a French horn, but not like being warmed up, which I hear a lot. My son plays French horn. He's quite good, but when you're not warmed up, there's kind of a sound to it, and that's the sound that they use here. It's quite interesting. Very, very raunchy. This is sort of the most raunchy of the tracks, but what's interesting is at one point she says, like to be alone, not alone. And again, it's that weird desperation that might be in these lyrics as well. The album ends with Siren, which is maybe the most interesting song lyrically. Again, it's a little bit in that house mode. And, you know, the Siren is, you know, someone who, in the Odyssey, right, is a beautiful woman who called Odysseus and was pretty and sang a song and then brought them to shipwreck, right? But here it's sort of twisted around so that the Siren is kind of a victim. Like, a Siren is sort of the victim of Odysseus, in a way, because the Siren is just calling for somebody who's successful. There's even a quote from Scarface, or semi-quote of Scarface, first you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the girl. In Scarface, of course, it's then you get the women. But here, like, it seems like this Siren is just kind of a sad figure, because this powerful, rich man is just there's just not much to him. He just has a fast car. He's just cool. It's really the Sirens. He's not cool. He's just rich. It's the Sirens actually who are more interesting in this song. A beautiful pre-chorus on this, very well produced. And then I realized as I was listening that the chorus and this whole song, I think, speaking of unexpected pairings, I think this song would go really well with the 80s hit, unexpected hit, Fast Car by Tracy Chapman. So Tracy Chapman was like this folk singer who had this random mega hit in the 80s. And it's all a song about like a woman being in a fast car and like being impressed by the guy who has a fast car because she comes from poverty. You got a fast car, I've got a I don't remember the rest. And in this song, she only wants a good time, nice things, long nights, riding in your fast car past the city lights. Again, it's much like Fast Car, it's sad. It's mournful. It's a mournful song about a night of partying. And I think that's what also makes it very Nowistic, is you can't really have songs about partying and having fun anymore. You have to have songs about how partying and having fun are just covering up the emptiness. A great kind of super industrial party synth that comes in after the bridge, sort of 80s, and has a great outro. So there's my take on Shygirl. Living in the present, being the present is the future is the past. With that, I better get ready to teach. What am I teaching now? IR verbs. Choisir, finir, réussir, à. If you're out there and you're a French student, just don't forget that réussir and obéir always take the preposition à. Okay, so obey and succeed. There's the camera.